Report progress.
Hello, this is Cloud. Welcome to a design thinking overview. The objective of this session is to have you understand how design thinking works within an enterprise and why it's such a powerful tool. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the corporate innovation model. So here you have a typical model. There's all sorts of different drawings of a model like this available. But if you see, almost all models have a similar kind of thing where you start with strategy, most important part. And then what you do is you pick opportunity areas with these strategies. So let's say you decide to build a new business. This would be the strategy would be to develop this new business and have it be of such a size, for example, by a certain date. And then that would be, you would take that in then and you would explore that. The business owner who owned that part of the strategic plan would then put together a design thinking team. And the design thinking comes all the way from back here, where you're actually exploring the ways that you could do that. And you're exploring with customers and research and selecting ideas and generating, selecting ideas, and then prototyping, experimenting. And then once you've decided that this project's going to go ahead, then you scale testing and create a viable business model. So design thinking is within the overall corporate innovation model. And typically, for a larger company, you'd have multiple of these design thinking projects going on at a time, all aligned back to the strategic plan. Okay? So just remember that here's where you are. You've got a strategy, these design thinking projects all aligned to that strategy. So when does innovation happen? Innovation happens at the intersection of these four lenses. So the first one is the human lens. Do customers want it or need it? And the second one is the business lens, which is all about viability. So should we do it? Is there a viable business model? Feasibility is about, can we build it? Is there technology available to build it? And finally, the last lens is integrity, or the impact on planet, people of this innovation. And if it's got a negative impact on planet and people, then how do we stop that from happening? How do we make sure that what we're doing is at least neutral, but hopefully positive? And design thinking says to go in through the desirability lens to start with, to make sure that you have customers who are going to want what you do. All right. So many of the most successful companies and desirable companies in the world use design thinking. So for example, Microsoft, of course, and Apple, Nike, Lego, you see all the names up here. These are really, really successful companies. There's a list is way more, dozens and dozens and dozens of very successful companies we can put up here. So why do they use design thinking? To get superior business performance and higher return on investment? Absolutely. To get enhanced user and customer experience? For sure. Stronger research-backed business decisions? For sure. All design thinking projects are based on very strong research. To get a greater competitive advantage in innovation? Absolutely. If you start with what the customer tells you, you at least you have a very good chance of being successful. And improve company culture and team alignment? Absolutely. One of the powerful things about design thinking is you put together these diverse teams, which brings people together to come up with ideas to change your company. Very, very good for company culture and team alignment. But the main reason that they use design thinking is because it works. So here is the design thinking model. You start with some kind of wicked problem because typically you're not going to use design thinking for something simple. You're going to use some other method, just critical thinking or something. But you're starting here with a question that you really don't have any idea of how to answer. One thing about design thinking, it's got this tagline that's associated with it. Don't fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem. So the design thinking methodology is split into these two different phases, problem and solution. So the problem phase has empathize and define, and the solution phase has ideate, prototype, and test. It looks like a linear process, but it's really not. I recommend going through it, especially as a new design thinker. Go through the process once, remember this process, and then once you get through it once, you can iterate. You can go back to the define stage or ideate stage, or from prototype back to empathize. That's really up to the designer, the design team. So it is iterative. But one thing you want to make sure is start here. Don't start here ever. You really start with what is it that we're trying to do, and then starting to talk to customers and doing research. So let's go through the process quickly. So the first step is you take this question and you start to empathize with customers. So you're talking to customers, you're really understanding, and you're doing this deep ethnographic research into not just trying to understand what they need, but what they don't even know they need. In other words, understand their problems. And so if you understand their problems, you can actually better articulate what they need. And then, of course, doing research into the domain, whatever the industry is, all that kind of stuff. The next, once you get all that rich information, you bring that in and synthesize it in the define stage. So in the define stage, what you're doing is pulling it together, putting all of these sticky notes on a wall, all these insights you got from the first phase and stories, and you put them together, and then the team comes up with a specific problem that you can solve for a specific type of customer. So the idea is what you're now trying to do is take all this information, almost too much information, and distill it down into a specific problem for a specific customer. Because then what you can do is you can come up with ideas on how to solve that problem. So in this phase, you bring together a very diverse team from across your company, and maybe even with customers. That's customer co-creation is an option. And you're bringing together people, and you come up with as many ideas as you can, because you have to have lots of ideas to have good ideas. Then you with that same team, and maybe working with the business sponsor, you pick a couple ideas to prototype, or at least one. You develop a prototype, and then you test that with customers. And then, of course, you iterate, because you're never going to get it right the first time. It'll never happen. And then finally, the project either dies because it turns out that there isn't, you don't have a business here, or you release it. You then release it, and you go through your normal backend processes to create a project to actually implement it in production, and that will change the world. So design thinking comes with some rules of engagement. These are design rules of engagement. You want to make the customer the heart of your decisions, because that's why it's called human-centered design. You want to welcome uncertainty and ambiguity, because don't be afraid of it, because throughout the process, design thinking is about taking uncertainty and ambiguity and then getting to radical clarity. So you want to have a beginner's mindset. Let's say you're in an area where you have a lot of expertise. You have to be able to park that and actually listen and learn and not think you know everything. Because if you think you know everything, you're not going to create anything new, because what could you create? So you want to actually park your predispositions and your biases and your knowledge and listen. Be curious. Curiosity is a superpower. Always ask why, try to understand better. Start with an assumption, but then test and act on your information and bring your design mindset. And a design mindset looks like this: focusing on human values, showing, don't tell. When you're prototyping, you're able to explain something so much better. We can actually show something, and they can actually interact with it better than if you just describe it. You want to embrace experimentation, because experimentation is another superpower. It's a way of really getting to very quick, cheap way of figuring out where you are. Are you in the right place or not? You want to be mindful of process. As I said before, you want to make sure that you remember that, put the problem before the solution, things like that. Make sure follow the process before, and that you can still iterate. Make sure you do all parts of the process. Have a bias towards action. It's very easy to get into procrastination mode. Don't allow that to happen. You want to collaborate with that team you have. Diverse team is an unbelievably strong team. So you want to really collaborate strongly. And then craft clarity means just be precise. Once you get to the point where you know what you're going to do, then you want to craft clarity so that everybody understands. Systems thinking is something that is very important with any company of almost any size. And the reason for that is it's not just, even though we're designing for humans, almost all the things we're going to do are going to have other stakeholders, internal, external stakeholders, systems that are involved. Take a hospital system or an academic system, extremely complex system to make changes in. So you're going to have to focus on the needs and experience of the customers while you're considering those systems and stakeholders. And you got to collaborate with the stakeholders, employees and partners, etc. And there's this process we call zooming in and out. So you're zooming in to see what the experience is of the customer, and then you're zooming back to understand all of the different systems that are involved there. Bank of America Keep the Change program is a classic example and one of the most powerful examples of design thinking. So here it starts with in 2004, Bank of America hired design agency IDEO to boost their enrollment numbers. They asked the question, how might we encourage new customers to open bank accounts? So with IDEO, they started talking to customers. They found out that one woman rounded up her checkbook for easier calculations and a buffer. They found that a single mother struggled with savings. They had nothing to put aside. And that even a small amount saved is good, provided a financial buffer to manage financial security. So what they did was they reframed the problem as how might we help families save money? And if you think about that, think about this here. How might we encourage new customers to open bank accounts? Was reframed as how might we help families save money? Because this is what customers care about. So how can we get customers to open bank accounts? By figuring out a way to help them save money. And so what happened is they put together a diverse team of product managers and finance experts and software engineers and operations people, held 20 brainstorming sessions, developed 80 product concepts, and came up with one favorite idea. Then the team created a cartoon video displaying the Keep the Change program, and then they tested it in an online survey with 1,600 participants. So the way the Keep the Change program worked, you'll be familiar with this because you've seen it all over the place. This was just where it was created. You have a debit card that's associated with a savings account. When you buy a coffee for $2.30, the 70 cents change goes into the savings account. And so it's out of sight, out of mind. The idea is at the end of the year, you have a couple $100 sitting there in savings. So this is a very popular program. It took off quickly. First year attracted 2 million customers. It's since grown to over 12 million who have saved a total of $2 billion. And 3 in 5 new Bank of America customers choose to enroll in the program with a 99% program retention. That's why I say this is an amazing program. Really did a great job. And the cool part about it is it's being used a lot in social enterprises to have people donate by allowing the social enterprise to keep the change. So this is another example, second example, and this one is one from my own career. So in 2017, the company I worked for, UW Insurance, brought 2 groups of brokers into our innovation lab, which I ran at the time. They brought in a couple large network brokers and also some smaller, very digital savvy brokers in 2 separate meetings. And we asked them the question, how can UW improve the distribution channel for brokers? And so we had 2 full day sessions with these groups of brokers. And we found that digital brokers and large broker networks had some different pain points, but they had a few common ones. The 2 that stood out were a lack of digital connectivity to carriers, and what we call APIs, the ability to direct connect between your system and the carrier systems. And the second one, and exchange data. And the second one is brokers' access to insurer knowledge bases. So here's the issue. So a customer comes into an insurance broker and asks for a quote. And the insurance broker has a bunch of different insurance companies they work with. So, for example, UW Insurance, Aviva, and then a bunch of other ones. And these are insurance carrier portals, like websites. And so this broker has to go manually each of these websites to get a bunch of information. And each of the insurance companies load up their information onto each of these portals separately 8 times. These are 8 updates, different timing and processes, different products and terminology across 8 insurers. And so the brokers called it a knowledge nightmare. And also separate portals for insurer with different technology, credentials, etc. So it was really, really hard for brokers to do the job that they're supposed to do. So brokers said there must be a better way, and customers, I think, would agree with them. So what we did was we took all of the issues that came up that day, all of the opportunities, I should say, where there were problems, and we mapped them onto this 2x2 grid of importance versus complexity. And these 2, which I just mentioned, knowledge management and API connectivity, ended up being the most complex, but the most important. So we said, let's take a look at these 2. So API connectivity is interesting because there's already a program that's been going on for many years in the insurance industry in Canada to connect the back-end systems of insurers with brokers automatically. But it's been going on for many years and is extremely complicated. The knowledge management system has never been attempted. So we thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Let's go take a further look at that one. So what happened was we then reframed the problem based on our meetings with these brokers as how might we provide better access to insurer information to better service our shared customers? And we called it Google for Brokers. So our innovation lab, along with some co-op students we had, spent several months researching and ideating on the question, studied our own portal with our own WMIM documents, and experimenting with AI techniques to see how we could potentially solve this wicked problem. But I realized it would be impossible for us to get the industry to move with us because that's not the way the insurance industry works. It's not cooperative like that. And I knew the industry was already consumed with the API question. So we knew we could solve the problem ourselves. So we reached out to a Canadian insurtech broker-faced chatbot partner of ours. So that's a startup who was already working with many of the brokers in Canada. And what they did is provide a chatbot company named with ProNavigator. We wanted to see if they collaborate with us on the issue. They agreed, and we collaborated on a solution. Ask Sage was a system ProNavigator developed with our help and support. This AI-based system was adopted by other leading insurers due to broker pressure to support the product because ProNavigator developed it with the broker, and then the brokers pushed the other insurance companies to adopt it. We didn't have to do that. So the carriers have even started to use the product for their own needs. This was a big win for WMIM as we figured out a way to help the broker channel, which matters a lot to us. They do all our sales and service by leveraging a scrappy startup and brokers. So this was our part of our launch event, I should say. So we had a launch event at Communitech in Kitchener. I did a presentation. We had a couple other people who did. We did a little bit of a digital roadshow, and we had invited a lot of our best brokers to this meeting. And then at that meeting, we announced that we were working with ProNavigator on Ask Sage. We had a demo there, just an MVP, and we showed it to them, and all of the brokers went crazy. They liked it so much. They thought it was such a great idea. And so then we offered joint design thinking workshops at Communitech in Kitchener to explore broker and carrier needs for a commercial version of Ask Sage. And that's what we did. So here's an example. And each of these was wellness employees from our UX team who worked very, very closely with our lab out there with some of our best brokers talking about and getting their insight. So this was really the next phase of our design thinking enterprise. So now we're getting more deep information from brokers on how to develop the production version of this. And as you can see, lots of interest at these meetings. So just recently, I reached out to the CEO of ProNavigator, Joseph D'Souza, a really great CEO, and I asked him, how's it going since because I retired a few years ago. I asked him, how's it going with ProNavigator? And he said, we continue to grow in Canada due to all the merger and acquisition that's been happening. We've been partnered with some of the larger brokers, including groups like Hub, NFP, and Gallagher. These are very large brokers. Western Financial Group is owned by Wellness Insurance. And that is a really terrific win. And so that is a couple examples of how design thinking can be used within your enterprise. Like I said, if you get a chance to learn more about design thinking, you'll find that it's a really terrific methodology and tool. Thank you very much. And